In this lesson on information processing, we will consider how information is received by humans, how it is considered, and how a response may follow. We receive information through our senses: sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. When flying an aircraft, the pilot must observe, interpret, and then react to information received from the senses, both in the cockpit and in the environment outside the aircraft. Information processing can be represented as a model or flowchart. This captures the main elements of the process, from receipt of information to making a decision. The process starts with the stimuli of sounds, smells, sights, sensations, and tastes. These are received by the receptors and sensory stores. As long as the stimulus is large enough to get over the sensory threshold, for example, a noise is loud enough to be heard and infrequent enough not to become accepted, known as habituation, then it will register in the attention mechanism. This information is interpreted into a meaningful message with the help of our stored experience and knowledge, which we can call our perception of stimuli. In reaching an interpretation of these stimuli, our central decision maker relies upon our short-term and long-term memories. The central decision maker then decides upon a course of action. It may be an unconscious action, called a motor action, such as changing gear in a car, or a conscious action, such as selecting an engine close-down program. The effect of this action will then feed back as a stimulus, and the process continues until the required response to the original stimulus has been made. By using this model, it is possible to identify where any error has occurred. For example, the long-term memory may have suggested the incorrect Mayday radio frequency. Let us look in a little more detail at the elements of the model. The analysis of the inputs, which come from the outside world, are described as bottom-up or data-driven. The analysis of inputs, which come from prior knowledge and are stored in the long-term memory, are known as top-down or conceptually driven. An example of this would be that you observe a black shape in a park. The analysis of inputs from the outside world and from prior knowledge enable you to interpret the black shape as a Labrador. Where both types of analysis are present, which is the norm, it is called interactive processing. Stimuli, such as a bell ringing, are stored for a brief time after the input is finished, in what are called sensory memories. The ability to retain these stimuli for an ultra-short time is essential, as when they first arrive, one may not have the processing capacity to deal with them. The sensory memory for sound, or echoic memory, lasts for between 2 and 8 seconds, and enables one, for example, to recall the chimes of a clock even though one did not immediately concentrate on them. The sensory memory for sight, or iconic memory, only lasts between a half to 1 second, but 80% of information processed comes from the things we see and is therefore very important. On the screen, 8 keyboard letters were shown. Did you read the words black dog? Sensory receptors adapt fairly rapidly to stimuli. When first sensed, the receptors respond at a very high impulse rate, but gradually this will reduce and may ultimately produce no response at all. That is why we do not feel our clothes against our skin, nor do we notice the traffic after a while. This lack of response to continuing stimuli is called habituation. If the stimulus registers with the sensors, it moves to the next phase and gets into our attention mechanism. However, there is no guarantee that we will pay attention to the correct or important stimulus. For example, two pilots may continue chatting, even though their peripheral vision may have observed a warning light flashing. Attention can be defined as the concentration of mental effort on sensory or mental events to enhance perception and performance. Distinguish this from vigilance, which is the degree of activation of the central nervous system. Due to the limitations of the central processor, we are generally unable to pay attention to a number of different items at the same time. Although attention can move quickly from one item to another, it can only deal with one item at a time, which means that a pilot must prioritize. This is known as single-channel processing. Attention can take several forms. Selective attention occurs when one is monitoring several sources of input, with greater attention being given to one or more sources which appear more important. A person can be consciously attending to one source whilst still sampling another in the background. This is known as the cocktail party effect, whereby one can be engrossed in a conversation, but one's attention is diverted as one hears one's name mentioned on the other side of the room. Distraction is the negative side of selective attention, such as when a pilot is receiving too much information. Divided attention occurs because our central decision-making channel can timeshare between a number of tasks. The pilot flying a visual approach will be dividing his attention between looking to maintain his approach and checking instruments. Whereas it would appear that he is working on a number of tasks at the same time, in reality, the central processor is spending a fraction of every second on a number of different tasks in turn. The mind always pays attention to something, but the danger for pilots is that attention management is poor, and that attention is paid to the incorrect stimulus. The amount and quality of attention paid to any task will be reflected in the performance of the task. Similarly, the extent to which we are ready to respond to a task, which is called arousal, also has a direct bearing upon performance. This relationship can be represented by an inverted U-curve on a graph. At times of low arousal, such as in the cruise, a pilot's attention may wander. Generating artificial workloads, such as a 5-minute position check, or making timed radio calls, may help to focus attention. At optimal arousal, such as on an approach which is going well, the central processor is at its most efficient and performance is at its best. At times of high arousal, there is a real danger of the central processor becoming overloaded. There may be too much information, called quantitative overload. Or the information may be too difficult to understand, which is called qualitative overload. A few of the symptoms of overload are a sharp degradation of performance, blinkered attention, and mood swings. Stress will obviously make things worse, and we will look at this in greater detail in the lesson on stress. After the information has been gathered and noted, it has to be interpreted or converted into a meaningful structure, that is, our perception of the information. This perception may or may not be correct. Take a look at this triangle and read what it says. Most people will read the first 3 lines, and because it's a well-known phrase, they believe that they know what's coming next. But look closely, and you will see that there is an extra "the." One could say that our perception is what we make of what we sense. Two people seeing the same scene will, more than likely, describe it differently. For example, look at this scene and make a note of the order in which you perceive things. Did you first see a tree or people? What makes us see things differently are our mental models that we each have, based upon our past experiences and learning. One person may assess whether the tree is safe because of a past mishap. Another may assess the color of the leaves because of his interest in foliage. Perception is always subjective. The advantage of having mental models is that the brain can speed up the perception process. However, the disadvantage of the mental model is that stimuli may not be given adequate attention, with the result that we make the facts fit our mental model. A pilot may be expecting engine 1 to give trouble, and when an alarm is sounded, he may jump to the incorrect conclusion that it is indeed engine 1 that has the problem. It is in fact engine 2 that has the problem. For example, when unsure of one's aircraft's position, one may try to fit the map to what one sees on the ground and say, "That's Oxford, isn't it?" because we are hoping to see Oxford. Seeking information which confirms our model and ignoring other evidence is known as confirmation bias.